Well, hello and welcome back to Cureless Mania, where we talk all things pop, rock, and prog. And first things first, I am over the moon to have this gentleman back on my channel, Mr. Matt Williamson from Pop Goes the 60s. Matt, how are you today?
Hello, Tom. Thank you for having me back. I'm doing very well today. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's a thrill, lots of fun. We always have a good time, and we are here. He is returning today to talk about a legendary band, the Buffalo Springfield. I don't know how we got to this point, but we were talking about next, other content we could do, and this band came up, and I'm so excited to be talking about it because it's really the Buffalo Springfield to me was always like what could have been, you know what I mean? It almost, I mean, there's some great things, but it almost feels like it could have been even better. Do you have that feeling sometimes?
Yeah, I would have liked to gotten one more album out of them, and
Yeah,
then they could go their separate ways and do what they did,
yeah,
because I don't think they could have done it within the confines of the guys that they had. Because
yeah.
as we see, if you follow the Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young story, the Stills and Young combination is very volatile. So, I mean, I don't know how that would have long would have lasted in the Buffalo Springfield, but what a great group. There was other guys in there that were excellent too. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Even in the best of times, Neil and Steven would just, there was always this, to your point, there's always this volatility going on. And really the third, and we'll get into this, but even like the third record really is kind of just pieced together. It's not really, it was sort of a pieced together after the fact kind of thing.
Correct. And they, unfortunately, they're broken up by the time it was released. So,
Yeah, yeah. So really, I think I was toying with some sort of subtitles for this, but one of the subtitles I was thinking about was brief but brilliant, or brilliant but brief, because it's just so fast. It's only really 2 years, I'd say, that they were together from like start to finish.
if that, yeah. And that's a great title, Brilliant but Brief. But yeah, there's a lot of 60s groups that fall into that just had all this potential. And because everything was so incredibly competitive, it was hard to
Yeah,
get,
yeah.
not everybody could get a record contract. So,
Right, right. Absolutely. And there were so many. I mean, even the ones that did get contracts, as you're saying, there were still a ton of bands that was still to compete with, even the signed bands. So yeah. So anyway, so the Buffalo Springfield, I mean, essentially, I mean, that we could talk a little bit about the story about, how they formed. I mean, it's this famous story about how they ran into each other on Sunset Boulevard or something, whatever it was. They were stuck in traffic. But really, there's a backstory where Stills had been in Canada and he had seen Neil and they had talked, and they were both, sort of mutual admiration society even before that. And Richie Fury had been in like these vocal groups with Stills, the Go-Go Singers, and they had met in New York in Greenwich Village, where they're both trying to make it as a folkie. So yeah, so there's a sort of a backstory. They kind of at one point had kind of touched base with each other.
yeah, that's right. The folk boom of the early 60s, once it was, even when the Beatles hit, that folk boom still continued on with Peter, Paul, and Mary and a couple other the big folk ensembles. And Stephen Stills and Richie Furay were in one of those. I forget it was called the Go-Go Singers.
Mhm.
And so they did some folk music with these big groups and everything. And somehow they wandered up to Canada, and that's where they ran into Neil Young and his group, I believe, which might have been Young was in a couple of good different bands. They're kind of up and coming bands, and he wasn't really the lead guy. He was just kind of the new guy jumping into the Minor Birds or some of
Right,
these
right.
groups, with so that's how Stills and Young met, and they hit it off right away.
Yeah, no, they did. I think the Squires, I think, opened up for Stevens for the Go-Go Singers or something like that. And
Right, the
Steven,
Squires, correct.
yes, and Steven saw Neil and he went, "Oh my God, that's what I want to do." Because Neil was doing this sort of amplified folk, like he was doing it a little bit more aggressively, I guess, with an electric guitar. And Steven was like, "Wait a minute, that's really cool. I would love to do that." And like you said, I think they met afterwards and they really hit it off pretty quickly, I think, because they loved each other's thing, you know?
Yeah, and they spent some time together and they exchanged numbers. So they figured that I'd like to get together with this guy again. And I'm sure they knew they could form a band at some point in the future, but they just didn't know how that was going to happen or when.
Right.
So that, things as the 60s got moved very quickly, the folk rock thing happened. And that was really the impetus for everybody to move out to California. You know, the Birds hit big. You know, Sonny and Cher, I know they're not cool now, but they were huge then. There was all this stuff going on in Los Angeles, and that's where you made the records anyway. So
Mhm.
everybody
Right.
was heading out there, and eventually the guys from the Buffalo Springfield all headed out that way too.
Right, right. Because Richie apparently was very enamored of Steven and thought he had a great, was very his talent level, thought he was just unbelievable. And he never forgot about that. And he really always wanted to stay in touch with Steven. And sure enough, he ended up getting in touch with him somehow. And then Steven said, "Yeah, yeah, I got a band. Come on out to California." And it turned out he didn't have a band. He just basically said, when Richie showed up, he's like, "Well, there's no band." But he's like, "Oh, we're gonna form one. Don't worry about it."
Yeah,
So
yeah, poor Richie. Yeah, he got bamboozled. He got lured out there. There was no band, and yeah, I mean, these guys didn't have money. It was very hand to mouth in those days. You had to start playing and passing the hat and going to folk clubs and start to try to make a little bit of money on your talents. So
yes.
that's how they started to make a little bit of money.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, when Stills and Richie Furay met Neil Young originally, somehow they got a hold of Neil Young's song. They got the song Nowadays Clancy Can't Even Sing. So they started working up songs as a duo, and Stills was writing some songs. Furay was writing a couple songs, and one of Neil's Young songs was kind of in their repertoire.
Hmm. Yes, yes, because apparently Neil had taught it to Richie, and then Richie said, "Oh, let me teach you, Steven. Let me teach you this Neil Young song." And I think when they met up with him, as you're saying, when they met up with him, they played it for him, and he was, I think that like won him over, like, "Oh my God, you're playing one of my songs," you know?
Yeah, that was kind of a very high compliment. So that did happen after they miraculously met. I don't know if you want to tell the story. I mean, I'm sure some people have already heard that one, but it's a fun one to tell.
It is fun. I mean, it's a fun story because they were talking about meeting in California or LA let's meet in LA. It was just, and this is you always have to remember this is pre-email, pre cell phone, it was just, you didn't have a way to get in touch with each other quickly. It was like letters, it was like whatever, trying to figure out, like, or calling, like, having a phone number somehow. And like you said, these guys didn't have a lot of money. They're probably living all these different places, and picking up and leaving and then going somewhere else. And so, but anyway, they were stuck. Long story short, Richie and Steven were stuck in traffic in LA, and they're going one way, and all of a sudden they kind of look over and they're like, "What that?" I mean, there's a hearse going the other way, and they're like, "There's a hearse with Canadian plates." And they're like, "Wait a minute, that can only be one person. That's got to be Neil Young," because they had talked about that. I think maybe Steven knew he drove a hearse or something like that.
Mhm.
So is that accurate? Something like that.
Yeah, yeah. I think the even more miraculous part of it is that uh, Stills had contacted Neil Young to go out and meet him in California. And the address, the letter didn't get to Young until well after Stills was actually out in California.
Mhm.
So Neil Young went out to California to search for Stills in Los Angeles. Now, Los Angeles isn't exactly a small city.
Right.
However, this whole idea of the music world and clubs and recording people and performers on the strip, that is kind of a small world. So he went out there with some idea of trying to find Stills, and they found each other
Yeah.
on Sunset Boulevard going opposite directions. If Neil Young hadn't driven that hearse, they never probably would have met.
Right. Right. Exactly. And he said, I think that Neil was with the bass player.
Bruce Palmer.
Bruce Palmer, yes, Bruce Palmer,
Mhm.
and they were together, and but I think they were heading out. Actually, they were going to go to San Francisco or something. They had been looking for a while. They couldn't find him. They were about to head out. So it's just amazing that they hooked up. They but it's funny because if you see the video of him of Neil on American Bandstand talking to Dick Clark, and he says he's got that Canadian accent. He says, "Well, we stopped and they stopped and we all stopped and then we started." So it's great to hear him tell the story. But so yeah, so anyway, so that's how the beginning of the band. And then once they had the band together, they found the drummer, who was Dewey Martin.
Hmm.
And then they were a five-piece and they had a full band. And they started, I guess what I understand, they just started rehearsing, and they got a gig at the Whiskey A Go Go, I believe. Is that right? Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, Young was just he was all in on Stills and Stills was all in on Young. So Stills had Richie Furay with him. Young had Bruce Palmer, the bass player, with him. And then Dewey Martin was just he was added. He was there. So
Mhm.
yeah, they got the gig at the Whiskey A Go-Go via Chris Hillman from the Byrds.
Exactly.
And that's where they began like I think it was a 4 to 6 week residency, and that's where they really formed as a band. That was their Hamburg. When
Yes.
Lennon said,
Exactly.
"Oh, we were, we what we generated there was fantastic. It was never recorded." That's basically what the Springfield was at the Whiskey A Go Go.
Yes, because they do a lot of talking about how great they were live, and oh, we were so good live, and oh my God, we never got captured, we never got recorded live, and that was we were so good, we were. He said they obviously were good because they made an impact quickly at the Whiskey A Go Go.
Everybody says they're good live, but when you actually get the recorded tapes, it never sounds nearly as good. But I mean, they must have had been having a great time, and I think they were
Right.
just growing together and just learning how to be a rock band because none of them had done a lot of that. Neil Young a little bit,
Hmm.
and I think they were, it was baptism by fire, and they're in Los Angeles on the Strip. So,
Yeah.
and they started turning heads right away.
Yeah, just the sheer excitement and enthusiasm, and I'm sure there was a lot of that going around. It was just that they had formed this band and they were all excited and they were like to your point, they're in LA, they're in where it's happening. They are there and they're at one of the hottest clubs playing a residency. So I'm sure it was very exciting for them at the time, and they were gaining fans quickly because they people did see that they were talented, and they got these managers Green and Stone, and then they went into a studio, and I'm kind of making it quick, but they went into a studio and recorded the debut. Um,
Mhm.
and this was the first, I would say this was the first one where, or the only one where they played as the five piece. This was like the five-piece band. There's no
Yeah, that
outside musician.
Yeah, that's kind of the quintessential lineup is the starting five. And that
Yes.
album, I mean, they recorded it rather quickly. It was not well recorded. And they were just kind of learning. They had a lot of original songs, though. In fact, all of the songs are original.
Right.
So that's impressive.
Yes. Yes, that's the one thing I was gonna I believe as well is that they really there was no lack of songs, and that to me was not something that a lot of bands had, like this overabundance of songs. Both Steven and Neil were very prolific and writing, not just writing songs, but writing great songs. I mean, writing very good songs. And this was released in November of '66, and right and I always think of sort of like the Beatles and the Byrds were kind of their big, like they were folkies and then they heard the Beatles and the Byrds. And I think those are the two like really big atomic bombs that, well, we can change our sound.
Hmm.
And that's what I always kind of
Yeah.
feel like with this record. It kind of has that folkiness, that folk bass, but then there's like that rock and roll, rock is coming in, and the Beatles and the harmonies of the Byrds. And it's just kind of all mixed together.
Yeah, this was, I would consider the folk rock period. But really, they're taking it further than what folk rock had done, further than the Spoonful had done, a different direction than the Birds. I wouldn't say further, but a different direction. And it's kind of going toward that singer-songwriter thing that becomes the thing with the first Crosby, Stills and Nash album in '69.
Right, right, exactly, exactly. So what is your take on this debut record? I mean, you already said that, yeah, it was recorded quickly. I mean, it wasn't really produced. Neil Young used to always say, "Oh, we didn't get any good production. The producers stank. They didn't know what they were doing." But it comes through anyway, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I never had a problem with this record. Obviously, they're getting started, so I'm not expecting, and this is pre-Sergeant Pepper. I'm not
Right, exactly.
expecting
Yep,
I
yep,
never expected much. So the songs are strong. A couple weaker songs on here, but it's a good balance of songs. And Richie Furay is doing more of the lead vocals where Neil Young would have been singing. And Furay had a song or two of his own that didn't make it on here, as a matter of fact. But
right,
yeah, the quality of the recording is bad. So Green and Stone, their managers, who also did some managing of Sonny and Cher, they were not producers, so they put themselves over as producers. And this is just part of the music industry where you kind of get screwed. So they had
yeah, pretty
a
much,
budget. So they recorded this album. It was recorded poorly, and the record label would not them let them re-record it. Which who would? I mean, it would double their costs.
right,
So they
right.
were really disappointed with it. There is I think Stills and Young were allowed to oversee the mono mix. Most people prefer the mono, although there are one or two tracks of the stereo version that I prefer because you hear an extra guitar in one, and that's in Everything's Wrong.
Okay. All right.
Is
Okay.
that the song? Everybody's Wrong. Sorry,
Everybody's
I knew I
wrong.
got that wrong. So anyway, I mean, most people prefer the mono, but I mean, it's a great raw album, and it totally fits who they are, and I think it works fine.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I honestly, this album has risen in my ranks of late. Like when I listen to it now, I just think it's got this really kinetic energy about it. And it's, I just think that they're showing some breadth of songwriting already. I mean, right out of the gate. When you hear things like Hot Dusty Roads, I mean, that's a little different, this song, that kind of, I don't tell no tales about no hot dusty
Hmm.
road. I mean, it's got like almost like a soul feel to it a little bit for a bunch of white guys.
Yeah,
You
and that's yeah, those guys they did have some soul. I mean, that's Furay singing that one, and Stephen Stills had some he Latin background that he could bring that to a lot of his songs. I think the song on here that would have been the great single is "Sit Down, I Think I Love You," which did become a
Yes,
single for another
great song.
band.
Yes,
That was
yes.
a single for the Mojo Men
Hmm.
the following year. But the single that they released, the debut was Nowadays Clancy Can't Even Sing, which is it's a very atypical pop song. So that was a kind of a risky one to lead off on. And I think it's a great song, but I think it just bubbled under. It didn't really do much.
Yeah, yeah. And I was listening to getting ready for this. I listened to a couple Richie Furay interviews, and in his mind, he thought that "Do I Have to Come Right Out and Say It" should have been a first single. He thought that was like a really nice, great kind of balladish
Hmm.
song for they should have.
Yeah, I think they should have started with a rock song, but I mean, and then they put the ballad on the B side, or have the ballad be the second single if you're lucky enough to have a second single.
Right, right.
But all of that was there was a lot of probably this is a management decision that they didn't have the best management, I guess, and despite the talent here, I mean, this came out quickly. They got it out before the end of the year, which is what they wanted to do, and it's you know, they were turning heads. I mean, bands like this, record companies were looking to sign bands like this. So
Yeah.
the main thing was getting the record contract, worry about the album later and all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So what is the story as far as for what it's worth? Because I don't think it was on the first pressing of the record. Is that right?
Correct. So this album came out today. It's known for to have the hit for what it's worth, and on my copy, it's got the little sticker on the front that says "for what it's worth."
Okay.
But that was not on the album because that song wasn't written until November
Right,
'67. I think
right,
recorded end of the month or early January '67. So that's from the um, the riots on Sunset Strip. And contrary to popular belief, Stephen Stills did not witness that. He was in San Francisco when that happened,
right.
and it was told to him through other people. So he wrote the song for what it's worth on that. And the song was released in, I believe, in January. That's when it started charting anyway. And it became an immediate hit. So this was one of the first, it was a protest song that was not written by, it was written by a band, not like a folk singer like P.F. Sloan or, this was progressive.
Right. And I always say that you listen to For What It's Worth, and it's a classic song. I mean, and you listen to the arrangement, and it's just interesting. It's a very interesting that those whole he's doing the harmonic. Neil, I don't know if Neil or Steven doing the harmonics on those on the 2 and 4, and it's just
Mhm.
it's a very interesting song if you really listen to it. It's well put together, well arranged, well recorded, well sung. The whole thing, you
Yeah,
know.
and though it was recorded just a couple months after everything on the debut album, it seems way farther ahead. I mean, it's a jump in
It
many
does.
ways in
Yeah.
quality and production. I mean, it doesn't really belong on this album.
Right.
So
Right.
they pulled a song off this album, and well, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit here because the band once they had the hit, then they could start doing television appearances and things like that. So they could be seen and heard outside of the Southern California area.
Right, right. And this was huge, right? National television was massive. And I think I know where you're heading with this, that they started getting offers to do national television. But Uh, and I think was this before the second record where the Johnny Carson thing?
Yeah, well, the original second record. So this album came out and didn't do much, but it was starting to sell because of for what it's worth. That
Right.
single was a hit. So they were playing a second album that looked something like this, called
Yes.
Stampede.
Stampede. There it is. You got it.
And
Love it.
this would have had for what it's worth on it.
Hmm.
So basically, from when for what it's worth, charting in February 67 in the top 10, over the next through the spring, the next album would have been Stampede, which was planned. And this album cover was actually printed and eventually handed out to fans. But this is when things already started to break down.
Right.
Personnels and different things started to happen, preventing them from getting that album out as a second album. So what they did is they just re-released this album as you know, it still was their first album, but they put For What It's Worth on it. So
Got it.
that if you can get a pressing with that without For What It's Worth, that's really expensive. So this is
Yes.
the one that really started to sell.
Yes. And the first pressing I think has Baby Don't Scold Me as the song. Not
Yes, Baby Don't
yes.
Scold Me.
Yeah. Not
And
for
that
what
sounded like just another one of the rock songs off that album. An okay song, but not nothing near For What It's Worth.
no, no. To your point though, I think Baby Don't Scold Me actually fits better on the record as a whole, but you're right. It's not the same song. It's not the same level. Uh,
Correct, yeah.
yeah. So Stampede, that's interesting. Stampede was going to be before was I was always thinking Stampede was supposed to last time anyway. I don't know what the timelines are. Who knows?
It
But
is confusing, and it was
it's
confusing to
confusing.
the band too. I mean,
Yeah.
they were trying to get to that next level, and the next level would have been an album where they could have recorded the way they wanted with songs that were, in just a few months, they were writing better songs, they were better players. The
Mhm.
production was making it so that they could take more chances in the studio.
Right.
So that didn't happen. And one of the problems was as Bruce Palmer got deported, the bass player, he got
Right.
busted for drugs. And
Yeah.
so Bruce Palmer, who's one of the least known members of the group, you got the big three. You got Stills, Young, Fure,
Right.
and then you got Bruce Palmer and Dewey Martin. Well, Bruce Palmer, as a bass player, was a fantastic, he was an interesting player. I don't know anybody else that sounds like him.
Yeah.
And when they started having problems, they had to replace a bass player. They struggled getting the right guy,
They did.
and they weren't able to go forward without Bruce Palmer.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that especially it affected Neil, right? Because as we know, he was originally aligned with Neil, and I think that he was a great bass player, and he was very unique. As you said, the way he played, it just fit perfectly with that band. And they had other bass players like Jim Fielder and people like that, but they just never quite fit. And I think that this is the beginning of the cracks are starting to show and Neil never, as Stevens always said, he wasn't a team player. He was not, he's like never played a sport in his life. And I think he always had this in the back of his mind that I want to be a solo. I want to be more like Bob Dylan. I don't know that I want to be part of this band. And so he was just going back and forth all the time, right?
Well, you're talking about Neil Young.
Yeah, Neil Young. Yeah,
Yeah, Neil Young, it's a good question what he wanted to do. I think him and the easy way to say it is that Neil Young and Stephen Stills loved being in a rock and roll band. They just wanted to be in control of it.
right, right.
That's the
Two
easiest thing
alphas.
to say.
Yeah,
So you have to
yeah.
relinquish control, and they were able to do that a little bit, but this was a problem with Bruce Palmer that was something that would slow them down. You got to cancel some engagements and things, and then Neil Young ends up leaving.
Right, right.
So there was this kind of issue with Young leaving, coming back, Bruce Palmer getting deported. He did come back.
Hmm.
So they're trying to fill these empty places. Meanwhile, you got the Monterey Pop Festival coming up, and they're invited to it.
Right, right. And Neil bails. He doesn't come to the Monterey Pop Fest, which is, I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, if I were Steven Stills, I'd be very upset. I mean, that was a massive opportunity, and he doesn't show.
Yeah, this is in a period where, so the second album that didn't come out as they wanted, the first album got reissued with For What It's Worth. So the recording tracks, still recording tracks for the second album during the summer of 67. And I think at this point, Neil Young, who had left the band, felt like, well, I'm going to do something solo. And that's where that happened. I mean, like you said, I think he always wanted to be like a solo player.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
and unfortunately, he left just before the Monterey Pop Festival or before a Johnny Carson show that they were going to be on. And
Yes.
his
Yeah.
timing for leaving was never good.
Yeah.
Things in the 60s happened so fast, you had to be ready.
Yes.
And so Young messed up a few engagements for the Springfield that would have been, they were high profile.
Yeah. Yeah. These
And
were
that
just
was the
minor.
problem.
These were pretty major, major things. Yeah.
Yeah, so that became Neil Young's calling card. Bruce Palmer was just unreliable for other reasons, not because he didn't want to be there or wanted to go
Right.
solo or anything. He just, that was more of a drug issue. He was a kind of a party guy like that. He was not dependable in that way. Not as serious of a musician, but still needed.
Right, right. And then you kind of wonder if Neil was like wanting, thinking in his mind, I'm going to go solo, and then it realized or went out there and tried to do something and it didn't quite work or whatever. Because he, in his interviews, he always says, "Well, I came back because the band was so good. Like I always came, I always came back because the band was amazing." So I don't know, but
Well, I think a more honest response is that he came back because the band had a hell of a lot more going and he was bottoming out. I mean,
exactly,
he was
exactly.
literally
Yeah.
in his own words, he said he was starving.
Right.
So he came back to the band
Yeah.
and they worked on the second album. So instead of it being Stampede, they ended up at, well, things were happening so fast it became Buffalo Springfield again, which a beautiful cover. So
Love the
they
cover.
had this kind of psychedelic cover, and the songs on here are a hodgepodge of them recording together apart any way they could,
Yes.
and it's
Yes.
they put together. This is considered their landmark album.
Right. Right. So really, I mean, the backstory of this record, as you're hinting at already, is that they're splintered. As we're talking, we have to talk about this history because they're splintered during the making of this album, but
Mhm.
somehow they pull out this gem of a record from this sort of various sessions and various studios and various producers, and it's all over the place. But it works out what very well.
Yeah,
So,
Mr. Soul had been recorded early in the year. I mean, some of these songs were recorded, would have been on that early version of Stampede, which theoretically could have come out just before Monterey, probably in April, maybe May, which would have been perfect.
yeah.
As it turned out, things changed. They weren't able to do that, and they could continue to record. So the next single they did, I believe, was Bluebird.
Yes.
And that single Stills was, I mean, that's a great song, but it was more for, I guess, in hindsight, FM radio play, which wasn't really taking shape yet. It was in its infancy.
Early days.
So,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
for a top 40 record, it charted, but it, was not in top 20.
And wasn't the original Bluebird like 6.5 minutes or something? It was almost 7 minutes, something like that. And then they edited it down.
Yeah, that song was their song they would stretch out on stage, and Young and Stills would go back and forth with guitar solos and things. And they did actually do a recording that was, I think, 9 minutes.
Okay.
And
Okay.
then the version on the album was reduced to about 6.5 minutes. And then the single was reduced, I think it was about 2.5 minutes. They just faded it out early. It was just kind of a very half-assed way to edit that song for single release. But I mean, I mean, musicians around were really impressed with this group. And the Springfield was probably more influential on other musicians than having a strong fan base of their own.
Yes, that's a great point. I really think that musicians were listening to this album for sure. There's no doubt.
Mhm.
And man, the highlights on here are so high. I mean, I think Rock and Roll Woman is just fantastic. I love that song. And I don't know if Crosby's singing on that or not.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Crosby he's hanging out with the Springfield, so yeah, he is singing on that. I think he helped with the arrangement on that. That song's about Grace Slick actually,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's most one of the best singles of late '67. I mean, it really shows that FM radio creeping into the AM world, but it's produced in a way that's very accessible. and
Yes.
just one of the great songs of the year.
Yeah, and I think that Crosby actually had the original riff that "duh, duh, 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 duh." It sounds like a
Ah.
Crosby song, doesn't it? It sounds "duh, duh, 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 duh." It sounds very Birds like.
Yeah, that da 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 da, and that's very very much Crosby. That's he does a lot of scat singing and that kind of stuff. So I think that's his influence.
Mhm.
And I mean the guitars in that song, layered guitars, it's just an absolute masterpiece of a song for them. And that's how they wanted that second album to sound, you know. And for what it's worth, would have fit perfectly on there had they been able to get it all together in time.
Absolutely. No, I agree. And I mean, and then, Mr. Soul is an amazing Neil Young song. Love that track. Expecting to Fly is the complete opposite. So Neil is all over the place. He's doing a kind of a down and dirty rocker with Mr. Soul. And then he comes with, on side one, later on side one with Expecting to Fly, which is like orchestrated with Jack Nietzsche. And he went
Hmm.
off and did that on his own, I believe.
Yeah, so he was in that period of, trying to go solo, and when it didn't
Yeah,
work, he went
right.
went back to the band, but he brought those songs back with him, and the band fleshed them out. And this was those songs were recorded after Sergeant Pepper, so you had the influence of Pepper and this grandiose production. The Springfield started bringing that into their songs as well. And those are two examples.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even think about that, that this is post Sergeant Pepper at this point. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that makes sense.
So,
Um,
mhm.
yeah, go ahead.
So this, I mean, those two songs, this album made them into a legitimate psychedelic group. I mean, they really were doing some heady stuff, not getting rid of that wonderful folk rock that they took to another level with these layered guitars and fuzz guitars and electric 12 strings and all this stuff. So they really, this is an important album for its day.
Oh, absolutely. And Broken Arrow is another one that's very, very cutting edge for the time. I mean, he's really I still think it's an interesting song. I listened to it today and I still go, wow, this song is very interesting. The whole like it's kind of done in sections and then there's little breaks where it's almost like I don't know quite sure what he was going for, but it's this very sort of there's a little bit of almost a little avant-garde-ish, at times.
Yeah, I would
You know?
agree. Yeah, so for going from the first album, which only had a couple of Neil Young lead vocals because they didn't think his voice was commercial enough, this album put him on even footing with Stephen Stills and clearly a capable vocalist, and especially for the songs he writes. So yeah, this album was so diverse.
Yeah, yeah, and incredible. I really this album is a five-star record for me. I just think it's fantastic. I mean, even the songs that apparently aren't, that we haven't even talked about. I mean, I love Every Days. I think that's a great Stephen Stills song. And I remember hearing Yes doing a version of it. That's how I was like, wow, Yes
Mm.
is doing Buffalo Springfield. That's kind
Yeah,
of cool.
every day's that's a jazz song, and you've got A Child's Claim to Fame, which is Richie Furay doing kind of his kind of country swing. That's a song about Neil Young. So
Right.
this album's got some great rock like Hung Upside Down and a ballad, Sad Memory. I mean, it's just got everything, and I would say it's even maybe slightly more diverse than Sergeant Pepper, though maybe it doesn't have the cohesion of Sergeant Pepper,
Right, right.
but it's certainly extremely diverse.
Yeah. Yeah,
There's
and
not another album out there that's as diverse as this album, except for maybe Pepper.
yes, yes. I mean, the diversity really works in its favor. And we talked about Bluebird already, but Bluebird is another just fantastic Stephen Stills song. I mean, that is
Mhm.
just high level Stephen Stills. So yeah, they're both on fire. I mean, Neil and Stephen are both incredible on this record as far as writing is concerned. Um, and playing. Like you were saying, that's one thing I never thought about is how much they progressed from the first to the second record. Is a pretty big leap.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like it's amazing that it's only about, between I would say 3, 4 months and then maybe 8, 9 months.
yeah.
So it's everybody was growing at light speed in just about every band. All the good bands, those were the ones that were progressing. The bad groups, the Pretenders, they fell off. But the
Right.
really good bands always showed through, and this is one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So that's I mean, the second album is pretty much the last like record that they did together. I mean, and even the second album as we said, it's splintered. I mean, they pulled it together, but it was like pulled together from various sources and they were in these they're constantly like, are they together? Are they not together? Is Neil in? Is Neil out? Is Bruce in the US? Is he not? I mean, it was just they had so many issues they were dealing with during the making of the album. Incredible that they came out with this gem. So essentially, last time around is, as we mentioned earlier, is kind of like Jim Messina joined the band as the bass player, and he kind of helped them to, I guess, to play some shows maybe. And he was mostly an engineer though, correct? I mean, hits.
Well, they went through some bass players. So Bruce Palmer left, he was deported, and they had a couple guys try to fill in for him. The most notable guy, I guess, would be Jim Fielder, who had played with the Mothers. There was another guy who played with Young and Bruce Palmer back in Canada named Ken Coblun. He
Mhm.
didn't work out. So Palmer comes back, and I think he got deported again. And Jim Messina had been around. He had worked with them. He had done some engineering on the second album.
Mhm.
And so he came, he was just essentially filling an empty space. They had a couple other bass players help him out to complete some tracks. And Messina's on that second album as well. But eventually they needed a guy, they needed to tour. So Messina became a full-fledged member and really the only other full-fledged member of the group other than the original five. And Messina, who was young and he was looking to get in a band himself, he really contributed a great deal to the dying days of this band.
Yeah.
And I think his contribution, without him, there might not have been that third album.
Right. No, I believe so as well. I think it was he was a huge factor in that, and I think that he loved the band. I think he was very enamored of Buffalo Springfield and would love to be. Oh, you want me to be part of the band? Of course. So and they owed Atlantic one more record, and the band at this point I believe was officially gone. I mean, once I think Steven finally threw in the towel. He said, I'm done. I can't do this anymore." And then
Well, Young came back. One of the things that plagued them, I mean, there's everything that went wrong with them. Young, I think, had left at least twice, maybe three times, but he also had epileptic seizures.
oh
And
right,
at this time, this was early times for Neil Young discovering this. So this was part of his, I think part of what makes up him being a bit of a loner, even during this time, before he got some of that stuff figured out. And there was some shows that he couldn't go on because he was having a seizure, or he'd
yeah,
have a seizure on stage,
on stage.
and the band members had to kind of understand what's going on, and they had to work around that and work with him on that. So that was also happening. But I think that they had a final tour. I think this tour they were in the South. I think this was with the Strawberry Alarm Clock and with the Beach Boys. So this was a big tour.
Yeah.
So they were supporting the Beach Boys. So this was probably their most high profile tour they did. And they were by this time they were, like I said, musicians love them, but they weren't really fans. The critics weren't really raving about them yet.
Right, right,
And it seemed like in 68 when they were touring and things were winding down, there's no way these guys were going to continue on.
right.
And I think this is when the critics kind of said, "Oh, wait a minute, these guys are really good. We kind of missed the boat." So you
Yeah,
start to see this wave of adulation in 1968 for these guys, and they were breaking up.
right.
And they were
Interesting.
late. The critics were late to the party, and they knew it. So they had to kind of backpedal here. That's
Yeah,
why up until about, I would say, well, the internet age, even early internet age, you saw a lot of critics saying that the third album was their best album,
oh,
which is
okay.
ridiculous. I think a ridiculous statement, but that's some of that tripping over themselves to give them the credit that they deserve because the critics look bad because they were
Right.
obviously a very good group,
Yeah,
could play and sing and had great songwriting. So that third album that did come out did get a lot of notice, and that's when they got, I think, a lot of very good press. And the singles from it didn't do anything, but a little bit. But
yeah. Was Kind Woman a single? Was that one of the singles?
well, I know that. Why can't I find it here? On the Way Home, I
Way
think that
Home.
was the main
Yeah.
single that
Okay. Okay.
barely got into the top 100. Very good song.
Hmm.
I mean, I know they did have another single. I didn't look up before our call here, but this was an FM radio band. This was not a band for hit singles.
Right, right.
So I mean, it wasn't to expect a single. Maybe would have not been what you should expect from these guys, but
Yeah,
more selling albums and touring. But they were
right.
broken up.
Yeah. So Jim Messina and Richie Furay were essentially tasked with putting this album together after the fact. After I had forgotten, you're absolutely correct that they had announced that that was their last tour when they were. I think they had said this is going to be it. Um, you know.
They did well. The last show, they knew it was their last show, and it
Yeah.
still's even there's you can find this on YouTube, I believe. And still says this is it, guys. And Young was there. Young had come back,
Okay. Okay.
and I'll tell you that it was difficult. I mean, Jim Messina actually cried on the way home from that tour. He
Oh.
literally cried because
Oh.
he knew how good they were,
Yeah.
and so unfortunately, Neil Young had started getting a little bit of notice because of the songs he did on the second album. Stills was starting to rub shoulders with Buddy Miles and David
Yes.
Crosby
Yes.
and Paul
Yes.
Cantor. So these guys started to hang out. I mean, it was Hollywood,
Yeah.
essentially. Hollywood for the rock style version of Hollywood. And there was no need, I don't think, to kill yourself to keep this band together that clearly was too much trouble to keep together.
Right, right. And a lot of the tracks on this record on Last Time Around are, essentially solo tracks. I mean, especially with Stills, I think, you mentioned Buddy Miles. Buddy Miles plays on Special Care. And he was using
Hmm.
all these session musicians and people that he knew and bringing them in. And Steven was proficient, as we know, on many instruments anyway, so he could almost make tracks by himself. Um,
Yeah, Stills was probably in heaven doing that kind of stuff. And
yes, exactly.
Neil Young isn't very well represented on this album. Although there were a couple tracks available that could have been put on here. Um,
Right,
like there
right,
was enough tracks for them to have done four albums. Let's put it that way. And unfortunately, Neil Young is not very well represented, but he is with I Am a Child, which is just one of his great songs. And
classic.
he wrote On the Way Home, which Richie Furay sang, and just a wonderful song going into, I guess, the Woodstock period. These are
Right.
the songs.
Yes. Yes. So what is your take on this record generally? What's your feeling? I mean, would you say that the highs are high and then the lows are low? I mean, how do you feel about this album?
I don't think there are too many low spots,
No,
but
not
there aren't too many high spots either. I mean, it's very good. By Buffalo Springfield standards, it's a little bit of a disappointment. That's why I say
right.
the highs are not super high. The standout tracks are the two Neil Young songs, On the Way Home and I Am a Child. Stills is getting into his thing with questions and 4 Days Gone. I mean, Stills is really developing his style. Richie Furay gets in a couple songs, and even Jim Messina has a song on here. So it feels a little bit countryish because there's more Richie Furay stuff.
Hmm.
But I like this album a lot. There are a couple other songs they had available that could have been on here. There's one song that didn't get released until several decades later called What a Day. That would have been the single to release off of this album after On the Way Home.
Yeah.
And great song, great hit potential. Written by Furay, but sung by Stills, if you can believe it.
Wow. Wow. That's a note
So
one. And
yeah, so
that
they
ended up on the first Poco record, right?
it did. Yeah,
Yeah.
so the Buffalo Springfield, just to jump ahead a little bit here, they had a box set that came out in about 2004 called I think it was just called Buffalo Springfield box set.
Right.
As I
Yeah.
look at it over on my shelf here, I didn't bring it down by my desk. But this had a ton of or a ton of songs that they had not recorded. Some are instrumentals, some wound up on Neil Young's first album, like Old Lady Laughing,
Yeah.
things like
Lady
that.
Laughing, right. Old
I
Laughing.
mean, the song from his first Neil Young's first album, The Loner, that's to me a Buffalo Springfield song.
It
That's
is. It's so I
typical
know, right?
Springfield. I mean,
Yes.
so that's what would have been that fourth album, late '68, had they been able to stay together or force themselves to complete one more album.
Yeah. Right. Right. Like imagine if they had worked together even like because on this album I think imagine if they were still together for this album and they actually were bringing in new songs and because I think a lot of this stuff was I mean it's funny because I'm talking about new songs. It's still only 2 years, but it's like if they had brought in like freshly written material for this, I don't know. Who
Oh
knows?
yeah, I mean, my background is 60s bands, and I always want, when they break up prematurely, I always say, oh, if they could have just one more album. So
Yes.
this is that. This is an example of that. If they could have done one more, and they would have been huge, at least on the live circuit, they would have
Yes.
been much bigger in '68 because you've got these bands, the San Francisco sound stretching out to those long jams, and Stills and Young were two fine guitar players who could do something very special, more so than a lot of other bands, really.
Yeah. And think about like just sonically, things were sounding better on stage all the time too, right? So if I mean as the years go by and then it's by 68, 69, things are getting better. You can start sounding way better on stage. You know what I mean?
Yeah, things slowly did get better, and not fast enough for a lot of the players, but yeah, it certainly did. So it's a shame that they couldn't do at least one more thing. Other things, Stephen Stills was writing all kinds of songs at that time, and
Yeah.
so yeah.
So here's the last question for you. Do you think you can hear on last time around, can you hear a little bit about where people are going? Like there's a little bit of hints about like you can hear a little bit of Neil's first record, you can hear a little bit of the Polka record, you can hear a little bit of almost a little bit of CSN coming in. Maybe? I
I,
don't know.
I would say no. I mean, I never felt that. I mean, and I kind of knew the answers to the test, so but when I was a kid and teenager getting into this music, I just longed for more Springfield. So the
Right.
first Neil Young album, the first Poco album, the first CSN album generally sound very new and that's why they were at the top of their game, because they were the new sound. With a couple minor exceptions. I mentioned the song "The Loner" off of Neil Young's first album. To me, that could have been a Springfield song.
Definitely.
Stephen Stills had done a demo called "Just Roll Tape" in 1968, which demoed a lot of his new songs. There's a bootleg copy of the song "49 Bye Byes," which was it's got backwards guitar in it and stuff. I'll have to send it to you if you don't
Okay.
have it.
Yeah.
But there's stuff that they were working on that if they could have got together, they would have been recorded as such as a band. But things don't always go that way.
Yeah, and it wasn't just roll tape. I mean, I do have that somewhere. I gotta find it. It's somewhere. But my CDs are not organized, but it wasn't that a Judy Collins session or something where he was helping her, and then he said, "Okay, I got a bunch of songs, just hit record," kind of thing.
Yeah, I believe it was. Yeah, and he railed off like 10 or 12 songs, and a couple
Crazy.
of awesome ones too.
Couple great ones, exactly. So a couple that became classics. Yeah, so yeah, it's incredible. I just it's fun. It's really fun to, Matt is doing a series on CSNNY right now on his channel, Pop Goes the 60s, and it's so far it's been great. And it's really fun if you're a CSNY fan, just to all of the different branches that just, it's like it's this huge tree of music and it's just fun to, talk about it.
Yeah, well, to answer your question, getting back to your question about did you see them going in this direction? Well, they gave us hints. So the songs like on the third Springfield album, Questions, that gets revisited with CSNY.
Yep.
Neil Young's song Country Girl, part of that was originally done with the Springfield that was left unreleased. That is an excellent version that the Springfield would have been on that second album that didn't come out, I suppose.
Yes.
And the
Yes.
name of that song, why am I not forgetting it? It is,
Down,
oh,
down, down.
Down, Down, Down.
Yeah.
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 So that song, there was a Richie Furay song, My Kind of Love. They had recorded that. Kahuna Sunset was an instrumental. Even the song Neil Young's Sugar Mountain, he demoed that in '65. That could have
Yes.
been on the first Buffalo Springfield album. It's a
Right.
shame that wasn't on, that they didn't
Right.
tackle that song, because that's just how many songs these guys had, and what variety they had in their repertoire.
Yeah, I thought I saw something that was like written in Neil's handwriting, talk about Stampede, that it was talking about the Stampede song list, that it was the original or something of like a proposed song list for that. And I think that Sugar Mountain was on that list. I
Well,
think.
could have been. Could have been.
Yeah.
I know that there was a handwritten track listing for the third album that yeah, for this one that Neil Young did.
Oh, okay.
And
Oh,
I think
maybe that's
What a Day was on there. So
yeah.
yeah, I mean, Neil Young was involved in all this, and when it came to putting the album together, always had good vision to what an album would sound like.
Mhm.
So you find all these handwritten lists that he's done through the years. So he did a couple for the Springfield too, but
Yeah.
unfortunately, a lot of those songs had to wait till that box set came out in early 2000s.
Yeah. Yeah. So interesting. But yeah, and you're right. It's interesting how many songs got recycled later. I was noticing that too. When I was listening, I listened to everything for this episode. I was just refreshing my memory. Not that I needed to that much because I've lived with this album with this band forever, but I love the like I remember listening to Country Girl and it's just that da, 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 da. And it's like and not only that isn't that also Broken Arrow? Like isn't that all like there's
Yeah, yes.
the same melody is like it's used like three different times and it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, so the Springfield had a lot more songs than I think people even are realize. If the people that have listened to the three albums know those three albums, there's probably an album's worth more to delve into.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Incredible. No, and it's worth getting the I remember I will just mention very quickly at the end that I the first time I heard the Springfield was this
Oh
comp
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
double
remember
album
buying that. I remember
double album
where
compilation, right? Yeah.
I even remember what store I bought that at when
You
I was a
do?
teenager. Yes.
Yeah? Oh,
Yeah.
it's a cool compilation, right? It's
Well,
cool.
that's got most everything they recorded plus the long version of Bluebird that you had mentioned earlier.
Right, right.
So that was kind of essential if you're a Springfield fan to get that long version. And the long version, I don't know. I don't think it's that good. But I mean, for completists, they'll want to hear it.
Doesn't it also have one song that was what's the one that's the Neil song that's on this compilation? Maybe I'm looking for it now. I can't find it. There's like one song that didn't make it on any record. I don't know.
A Neil Young song?
Yeah, Neil Young song. I'm trying to think of what it is. Down to the Wire.
Oh yeah, Down to the Wire. You're right. I
That is
forgot about that one. That was recorded. That would have been on that second album, Stampede, that never came out. Down to the Wire is a good
another
example
good
of
song. Yeah.
almost, yeah, great song, but almost like the old sound, the sound of the first album.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that song was already deemed a little bit passé by the time, mid 67 came around. That's why that one kind of got pushed off to the side.
Yeah. Yeah. So what was the name of the store? Do you remember that you bought it from? Do you remember?
Yeah, and so I'm from Milwaukee, and the biggest record store in the city at the time was called Radio Doctors, and that was
Okay.
downtown, back when you had big record stores in the downtown area.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
went down there and I saw, and I've got it here. This is it, the one I bought.
Yeah, there it is.
And Jim Messina gets his name on the front of the cover too, showing that he was a full-fledged member. But
Yep.
this was one of the early ones I bought, and it's got, like I said, almost everything they had. So
Yeah.
in those days, before internet. I mean, you had to scour through record bins and read liner notes. I mean, it was really an effort in research, which is what I eventually became. And it started with just going through record bins.
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember the thrill of going to a big record store back in the day and you would just be like looking for certain things and then you'd be like, "Oh my God, you look at the new rack, the new albums and it was all this big wall of albums." You'd be like, "Oh my God, what am I gonna buy?" It was so exciting, you know.
Yeah, those were the days where I would literally forego eating lunch and use my money to buy records and go hungry.
Same here. I do this. I used to cut lawns. That was my thing. When I cut lawn,
Mm.
I would make some money from cutting or raking leaves or cutting lawn, whatever it was. And I'd be like, "Oh, let's go to the record store. Okay, well, I got some cash. Let's go." Yeah, so I'd be so excited. But those, like you said, that's in the past. But it was fun.
Yeah,
It was fun.
it sure
Uh,
was.
yep, yep. So Matt, I would say, I mean, if there's any, do you have any closing comments about the Springfield?
Well, I would say that they live up to all the billing. I mean, some bands these days are slightly overrated. You get a little too much adulation, but I would not say that about the Springfield. I think that there's still a little bit. It's there's patchy. So delving into those cuts on the box set are really going to give you a fuller understanding of how good they were and how quickly they fell apart. Literally together, maybe 19 months or something. I'm not even sure I should have looked that up. But yeah, a very solid 60s band and one of the best.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing what they accomplished in such a short time, and also with all the tumult and all the conflict and the just all the problems that they faced, even within that 2-year period. The fact that they created all this great music is pretty incredible. So yeah, and it stands up. I mean, I was listening to it, for this episode, and I just thought this stuff. I still love this music. I still love it. There's something just very primal about it, and the songwriting still stands up for me. So
And they set the table for what was about to be the next big thing, which was the singer-songwriter period.
yeah. Absolutely, and I love that you said I didn't think about this. I love that you said other musicians were paying attention to them, and they definitely were. Um,
Very true. Yeah, they many have are on record saying that. So yeah.
Influential band in that regard. So,
Hmm.
what do you guys think? If you're with us this song, you must be a Buffalo Springfield fan. We appreciate you. Let us know in the comments. What's your take on the Buffalo Springfield? What do you think of them? What were your first impressions? What were the first album you bought? What was I always like to know. So let me know in the comments. Um, Matt, thank you so much for joining me again. This was a pleasure for sure.
My pleasure. I love talking 60s music, so you got another band, I'll probably be there.
Beautiful, I love it. Well, if you have not checked out his channel, I mean, again, I always say, what have you been living under a rock? Pop Goes the 60s is a fantastic channel on YouTube. That's Matt's channel, and he does some amazing um, profiles on bands that are multiple parts. And if you're a 60s music fan, you just it's like it's essential for sure. So I'll put a link below to his channel. And that's it. So we appreciate you. Give us a like if you like what you see, and please subscribe to the channel as well. It helps the channel grow. So that's what I'm trying to do. So I appreciate it. Thank you, Matt, and thank you everybody. And we'll see you next time on Curless Mania. See ya.